a great show, Danny and John. Absolutely fascinating. One thing I've got to say right off the bat, you mentioned, Danny, about the different generations going through a family business, but I was giggling to myself behind camera because I'm going, you not only have different generations, you've got 3 different families with 3 different types of generations going through. How the heck do you put all that together?
Again, one of the biggest challenges for us is that we're not a single family stream. We're 3 families coming in. And I think, like I mentioned before, is that the son of one of the founders ended up marrying the daughter of one of the others. So the one member of the 3 founders who wasn't related ended up becoming related through marriage anyway. So it is challenging. And being Italian, one of them's got 4 offspring, another one's got 4, and we've got 3. So there's 11 of us now in the cousin consortium. 11 potential future shareholders, so to speak. So yeah.
John, just talking about that with different family members, Danny did mention towards the end of your interview, he was talking about boxes and filling boxes, and he made a really succinct comment when he said, just because you're a family member doesn't mean you get to fill that box. You've had lots of experience with lots of different families. How many families do you work with that have that same attitude or are turning to that attitude as the new generations come through?
It's an interesting question. There are some family businesses that don't have boxes, so they don't necessarily have an org chart. Sometimes they're the micro-sized family business, and you just got to do what you've got to do, and it covers all of the aspects of the job. Then you get to larger families that are in business. Sometimes it can be you're in a position to learn the position, to learn what it's all about. Again, depending on who's leading the business. And what that might mean about learning that job. There are a number of businesses out there that are family businesses where somebody is put into a position and it isn't found out for some time that they're really not suited for that position. So it can be a juggle from the older generation's point of view. How do we pick and what are the jobs we need? It is really important that if there are jobs to be filled, they are satisfied, those positions are satisfied by people that are capable of doing those jobs. So if you don't have a family member that's suited to the job, that role, in my mind, people are critical to make any business work. You've got to have the right person in the right job.
I noticed when you came in there, you came from dentistry to small goods. Mm-hmm. I can see the correlation, obviously, but you grew up with small goods. Very interesting when you came in, your first role as it wasn't take on an actual position, was to go, let me discover about the business. And you'd grown up, you were part of the family anyway, you'd been there as a school kid working in there, but you came in with this, I'm going to sit down with everybody and make friends with everybody so I understand them. Where did that thinking come from? Did you have a specific strategy in mind for doing it?
Well, in my previous work life, it was all about relationships. Like, obviously you had to form a lot of relationships with government, with private practice and all the rest of it. So it was just natural for me to gravitate towards trying to understand who these people are that are there, even though I know exactly who they are, but why it is that they're there, what drives them to want to be there, what their passion is, what their desires are. So for me, that just came natural. I just needed understanding the business per se, as in, there's the pork and then we make a product out of it. That I grew up with that, even though I didn't know how to make it. I understood the small goods side of it, but it was just more the dynamics of the management team, which are all family, and trying to understand them. Just touching on what John said before, I am a huge advocate for PD, for personal development. So our number one value at Mondo Doro is development. And I came into the business and I've got an advanced diploma in dentistry, I've got other qualifications, but the first thing I embarked on was doing an MBA. So I said, look, I've got to do an MBA, I've got to get a master's degree in business administration if I want to do this job, even though I was more qualified than anyone else that was there, but that didn't give me the qualifications to fill that box. On top of that, now I'm enrolled into doing a company director's course, so I'm constantly looking to grow my own personal development, and that's something that I've kind of instilled in the next geners. I'm pushing them all. I mean, we've written our values and development's one of them, so they've got to be developing. And in family business, there's a tendency to not have to worry about that. Oh, I don't need to go out and become a qualified accountant if I know how to read a balance sheet.
No, I got to just follow up that, Danny, just listening to you then, and having Italian friends, they've got this ethos, almost this in their DNA. They don't worry about values. They don't worry having to, voice them because it's in their DNA. They just, well, this is just how it is. You come into a business, were the values actually written down? Was that something you went, no, we're moving into this next generation. We need to start itemising what we do actually value. Am I accurate in voicing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were no values when I went into the business, and I said, what defines us? What makes us come to work every day? What gives us the desire to get up out of bed and come to work? What is it that we're doing? So part of that process was I sat them down and I said, we're going to write a vision and a mission statement, and I want all of you to go off independently to each other and you write your own. And I didn't write one. I said, I'm not going to be involved in it because you three have been here since day one. So the three of them wrote their own vision statements and mission statements, came back, reported to me, and then I picked and chose a little bit out of it so that we can comfortably say that all three of them had a part to play in what our mission and vision statement is. So I picked snippets out of all of them. The same thing happened with the values. When it came to the values, I said, they were very unfamiliar with the process and all the rest of it. And I said, look, we want values. We want to write some values. And I'm very big on not having more than 4. So Doro, I haven't mentioned this as well, but Doro is the Italian word for gold, right? So literally translated, Doro means gold. So I said, look, our value is going to be gold to us. So I want our values to spell out the word Doro. So our values are development, open communication, respect and organised. And that's how I came up with that. So I said to the other 3, I want you to go off and write down 3 values that start with D, 3 that start with O and 3 that start with R. And they all did that, and we came back, and the same thing, we picked out the ones that we felt were most appropriate to our existence. And that's how the Mondo Doro values came about.
I absolutely love that, John.
It's great. There's something else here, Mike, that I need to really mention. And that is that Danny came in to the business and he had a soft entry into the business where he was accepted by the family. He had time up his sleeve to inquire about how each individual in the family was able to talk about their roles, their responsibilities and their perspective and their futures, not just with the older generation but the younger generation. And he was very much a catalyst in the change that's happening. Some families, and the majority of families in business, don't have the wonderful family member who is outside that can step in. So for Danny to take on the role as change agent in this business is a huge role to take and a great responsibility, because you've done it with great care and wisdom, I would suggest as well, by making sure that nobody is not brought along the journey. Yeah. Everybody seems to have been smoothly taken on the journey. Generally, as a consultant, you come in and you're very much an outsider, and it takes time to earn the trust, work with the family. So Mondo Doro is very much a wonderful thing.
Thanks for that, John. But I mean, you've got to say also that the people that I've been working with, there's a mutual respect and there's a mutual understanding. And whilst it's all well and good to say that I've kind of been the change catalyst, it wouldn't occur if we weren't all on the same page. So it took a while for me to get them to see where I wanted them to be, or where I think we should have been. But now that we're on that same page, we're all equally as responsible for the changes that are occurring.
I was going to say, Danny, in Italian friends I've got, their family values are so intrinsic in their DNA, and I'm sure other cultures are, but you're Italian, so we'll talk Italian. Did you find that because of that nature, because of that DNA, there was a trust and this is what we are. We do because they got the attitude, we do the best. We always do best. It was an easy road to take them down, to show them that, hey, this is just part of doing the best that you've always done.
Yeah, it is difficult in that they're so set in their ways, the founders, right? And and Italian heritage, I'm Italian, I'm still an Italian citizen, so I'm a dual citizen. So I love my Italian heritage, and one of my biggest regrets in my life to this very day is that I haven't taught my kids how to speak Italian, but because I can speak fluent Italian. But my wife is Italian. My mother and father live on the same street as my mother and father-in-law. So they live on the same road. So we're very close-knit Italian family. The thing is, that generation have a different understanding of things. I mean, I'm pushing very hard to have female presence on the board, and that's something that is, almost frowned upon in the old Italian. Oh no, you can't have women on boards. No. Also, when I introduced the independent advisor onto the advisory board, they don't, you can't tell people outside our family secrets. There's that sort of, which is humorous and entertaining, but it's a challenge, and they need to understand that, we manufacture small goods, so you've got to say that 80% of our customer base are probably grocery shoppers, and most of them, without trying to sound sexist, but is women. So having a female presence on the board will be able to give us a new light on how it is that maybe we can market our brand or develop our brand,
John, when you've got people like Danny that have been charged with, okay, you're going to lead us, you're going to help us get to where we want to go. I mean, you are an advisor. That's what you're a change agent yourself. You go in, I know you're on the outside, but in someone in Danny's position, what advice do you give to people who suddenly the family go, you're it, Danny, I know all the problems, but you're it, you put it all together, you make it happen, take us through, even though sometimes they don't want to be dragged along. What's your advice to people when they're getting those positions in families as the trusted person to help the family go forward?
If you're a family member and you're appointed as the leader of the change, you've got to find those people that are the cultural fit for you and your family to be able to start working on that change. There's a lot of different consultants out there, and they all have different specialties. They all have experience across the board in business, quite possibly. So you really have to find who you can actually get along with, who makes sense to you, who you feel understands you, and that you can have an open, frank conversation with. And that open, frank conversation means, no, I don't like what you're telling me. I'm not listening.
You said an interesting point there, John, culturally appropriate or matched. Is that do you find that even though families might come from different heritages, maybe mixed heritages, that the company has to identify its culture and then the people who come in have to be matched to that culture?
The people that come in, if you're going to work with somebody, I want to be able to feel comfortable with you talking about sometimes your deepest, darkest fears. And if I don't really trust that person, I'm certainly not going to necessarily feel comfortable opening up. Is that a fair comment?
Absolutely.
So when I say cultural, it's really this feeling of relationship. So am I going to be able to work with this person? Maybe 6 months, but it may be 6 years. It could be 16 years. Do I feel comfortable to work with this person long term? Are they going to have my best interests and my businesses and my family's best interests at heart?
It's interesting to talk about, and Danny, obviously you've got an Italian culture that's in the business, but Mondo Doro has got its own culture, its own life as a company. Is that important to you when you're looking at people that they may not necessarily be Italian, but they've got to match the culture of what you guys want to stand for?
Absolutely. So culture is a word that gets thrown around quite a lot now, especially at work, and we're trying to do things to, like, we got 51 people and they're not all Italian, so we've got all diverse cultures, which I find quite inviting and welcoming. But we are doing things, so like we started a little indoor soccer team at one point, so you can't be in the team unless you work at Mondo Doro, so we've got people come along playing soccer. We've got Continental Roll Friday, so we've got people that are buying continental rolls and having lunch together every Friday. And we're looking to possibly in the summer organise a cricket match. So we've got Indians that work for us and they're right into their cricket, so we can have a little bit of an Italian versus India kind of cricket game. But that's all about the cultures. But for me, the thing that I wanted to say in relation to the culture is that in Italian family business, there's a sense where family comes first. You know, everyone's watched The Godfather, haven't they? You know, family comes first and business comes second. I think the biggest challenge that I kind of faced, and the message I was trying to preach to the next gen is that the business needs to kind of come first so that the family can benefit from the business and not the other way around. So there have been 2 or 3 occasions where a decision needed to be made that is good for the business but might not necessarily be good for the family. And they were the tough ones. So, you know, my dad buying a beach house is good for the family, but using that money that probably could have been used within the business is probably better for the business.
I was going to say in business, and I'll ask you both this question, is it a common problem in family business where culture clashes with what we would traditionally call strategic business principles?
Okay, from where I sit, as a business grows, a family business, there will be borrowings, quite probably from banks or other financial institutions. And as we go through these growth phases, if there is a single leader, a founder of the business, that takes on this extension and the business grows and there's a next generation that grows into the business and they're actually functioning really well, part of his exit strategy is, how do I exit the business and leave the business in such a way that the next gen still has the capital and the access to capital that they can actually move forward with? So we have to, at some point in time, extricate those founders or the founder financially from that link to the business, so that the business can be a business standing on its own 2 feet, and that the founder or founders can separate, or that next gen, it could be 2nd or 3rd generation that's going on to the 4th generation, but somehow or rather there's linkage to the financial side of things where there's borrowings that have signatures and guarantees tied to them, that we need to release those kind of ties and possibly move them to the next generation. So that's just one little exercise that when it's a family business that starts and grows, there's this capital link and that may need to be changed along the way.
Is it that type of journey, and I'm not talking about your capital, obviously they get personal questions, but when you hinted before about professionalism, you're saying, look, I'm not saying they weren't professional, but you said, but I need to professionalise it. Is that what you're talking about, being a little bit more corporatist type structure so the business can stand on its own feet as the older generation or the founders now move on and enjoy what they've rightfully earned?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and like I said, with personal development, and you mentioned before, I mean, what happens in a family business where all of a sudden the founder just points at one of their kids and says, you're it. In my advice in that situation would be, if you're clever enough and you can acknowledge the fact that you're not the right fit for the job, well then the best business decision you can make is, I don't want that job. Or you go and equip yourself with the tools to be able to perform that job properly. And that's, like I said before, I was a big advocate on, yes, we've got an org chart and we've got boxes and we've got JDs, but the right people have to fit in the right boxes, and you need to have the proper skill set to be able to perform that job, because that is in the best interest of the business, which ultimately becomes the best fit for the family. So if I've got 2 kids and I recognise that neither of my children are capable of carrying on my legacy or the legacy that my dad has created, well then the best thing for the business is that they've got to acknowledge that, and then we appoint someone who can.
It goes into generational.
Yeah.
And it's been recognised, and it's happened a number of times where the ownership leadership can skip a generation and go from 1, miss 2, go to 3, and the 3rd generation comes back with the drive and the focus.
I am very conscious of both your times. I really appreciate this. But there's something you've both talked about today, and I know there's a lot of family businesses maybe looking at it and going to, and that is setting up an advisory board or a board. Do you guys have any advice? You've both been through, I mean, you sit on lots of boards, John. You sit on boards, you've helped your families, you've helped family businesses, both of you get boards. Is there any advice to someone looking now and going, we're right at that crux. We should really have a board. We really should have an outside advisor. Is there any strategies or key principles you would advise people how to move forward in that regard?
Well, look, with my experience, and yes, I do sit on another board, which has nothing to do with our family business. It's a completely separate entity altogether, and it's been an amazing experience for me, and I've learnt a lot. You can't undervalue what the board can bring to the company, and that's why I'm really pushing to try and get independents on there, outsiders, people within the industry. I mean, the board that I do sit on, we have a very distinct and a very clear skill set for each board member. There's 6 of us on there, and there are those that are in governance, and there are those that have finance, there are those that have industry experience, and so on and so on and so on. And I think if you can identify the skill sets that you require within your business, or if you can find any gaps, if you can identify the gaps that you need to fill, and you fill those gaps with the right people, well, then it just sort of completes the picture.
There's a stepping stone process in my mind, and that is go to an advisory board first. Okay? The reason that I suggest that is, number one, I don't know the size of the business that I'm talking to, and I don't know the level of professionalism. But when you start going to a board, then you're going to need documentation, you're going to need numbers, you're going to need people that are going to be reporting to the board on projects. They'll be reporting on strategy and risk and potential ways forward. So there's a lot involved in that is extracurricular to your day-to-day job. To find, and if you're going to be a director in that kind of position, then there's probably going to be some fee for you to perform that. Some families in business don't necessarily have the funds or are not prepared yet to finance a structure of a board, but they need to learn what a board and how a board, they need to learn what a board is about and how a board will operate. So an advisory board is a first step, and they can work very well with non-family members on them, people advising, coming along to meetings, and that's done. Similarly, you'll identify somebody that you think will be supportive and be able to share and support your business.
The last piece of advice for someone, you've both mentioned family organisations that you've joined for advice, and John, I know with your awards and things like that. What is your take on it? Someone says, I've never been to one of these organisations. Are they worth the investment, not just in money, but in time? Time's probably a more critical factor for people running a business. What's your take? What's your advice if they've never been a part, and what would you say to them?
Yeah, look, for me, networking has been huge, absolutely huge. And in the olden days, like I mentioned, in my father's generation, everyone kept their cards close to their chest. They never spoke about what was going on at work and all the rest of it. Being Italian, like I said before, we grew up with lots and lots of Italian families and lots of family businesses that I've seen go pear-shaped and badly, very badly pear-shaped. So that's always been in the background for me. I don't want to I want to make sure that does not happen to any of our families. So networking, joining forum groups, speaking to people, it's all about that. And when I say to Dad, like, oh, I'm going off to a forum group or I'm going off there, it's still, you should be here working. You're not working if you're not at work, whereas I think you need to realise that you can do just as much value to the business as long as you're networking and you're speaking to the right people about the right things, then that's all well and good. I mean, I had to attend a golf day once, and when I told my dad I was going to play golf, he just thought, that is ridiculous. You don't go and play golf during work time. But I ended up going to play golf with people, with Andrew Mostyn and people in the Mostyn group who we deal with, and I got to speak to him and form relationships with people in our industry, and I got a lot out of it, even though I wasn't at work that day. So I think networking with the right people is invaluable. So yeah, FBA are brilliant at that. So John can probably talk a little bit more about that as well.
When you're in family business, it is like being in your own home. You never know what's going on next door or the next door up the road. We live inside our own little worlds, and that's really good, but it also closes us off to opportunity, especially when we can see new things, new ideas. And the organisation like FBA, Family Business Australia, it's a not-for-profit. The idea is to help and support families who are in business. They have often meetings of networking set up to help families in business struggling through whatever daily issue they might have on the day. Their annual conferences, they have a state conference, they call it an Insights event. And that's a half-day thing where people get to talk about their issues with each other. It's quite an amazing place where the trust level is incredibly high. People are not there to tout for business. They're not out there to do anything but learn from each other and share. So this last family business conference I went to, one of the most amazing sessions was an interview by a professor from Europe who came to interview an 11th and 12th family business generation members from a family business. So the mother was 11th generation, the son was 12th generation in their family business, and this family business was started before the French Revolution. So I don't know any other place where I could actually go and hear somebody talk about their family's business, their trials and some of the issues they face and some of the possibilities they see for the future. A most incredible opportunity and something I'll never forget.
Absolutely amazing. Look, I am conscious of your time. I really do appreciate Danny from Mondo Doro and John Broons, the family business guy. Thank you very much for staying behind after your interviews.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks, Mike.